right. So basically, the hot shit right now is kind of the whole. Just so far has been a mess of Sony's reported. Still, I don't think it's been legitimately confirmed by Sony at all.
Not yet.
There's documents that have been leaked. Giant Bomb confirmed with like a bunch of sources in Sony. So it's,
they still haven't acknowledged it though.
Sony has not officially come out and commented yet.
Why, I don't know. You'd think they'd want.
I mean, at this point,
shit.
At this point, I mean, it seems like from everything I've heard, the leaks have been confirmed and are so well documented that there's nothing more Sony could really say. Like, it seems like all the info on how they're planning and handling this, like, the only thing they haven't said yet is a release date, and June's, like, right around the corner at this point.
October, November.
I mean, well, I would say maybe a little later, just because that's more when Morpheus launches, too, right? Or, I guess, PSVR.
You think they'd want to do it around that time, put up a bundle, or like, oh, it's a bundle, $700, look, it's a discount.
Maybe that sounds. Guess I could see that.
Like,
here's a thing that costs the same price of hardware. Here's something that is hardware. Have fun.
I think what they'll do if they come out E3 this year and confirm the 4.5 or the Neo as it's codenamed or whatever it is going to be named, they'll probably launch it next year because they wouldn't want to hurt their VR because that would be dumb. If they, like you guys said, here's VR and then here's a new system, you gotta buy one. You should buy the VR, but wait, there's the new system. Don't forget about the new system over there, but buy the VR headset. That would be a really silly thing to do because people, especially us, who don't have a whole lot of money, who have the, if we're presented with one of the two, granted, you might buy the system, which would then hurt their VR sales. Me, I'm going to try to purchase the VR, which, and I'm sure a lot of people might purchase their VR, which will then hurt their console sales. So that's odd.
I mean, it's already a bad idea, though. Doing this whole thing is already, in my opinion, for the most part, a bad idea. And especially even if they do it next year, like, it's not like PlayStation VR is going to come out in whenever it comes out, and it's going to, like, everyone who's going to get one is going to get one right then. Like,
no, of course
not.
I
got my Christmas money, and look, it's February now. I got my taxes back. I'm going to get one. Like, so even doing it next year is still stupid. Like, the whole thing is dumb. They shouldn't have done this in the first place. They should have made a console that had some power in it to begin with instead of going cheap and getting crappy stuff.
I'm so split on this because the pros and cons are just all over the map, right? And some of them we don't really know if they're going to end up being pros or cons. Like the pros of new hardware, it makes me a lot more confident in PSVR as hardware because looking at the specs of what it takes to run VR games well on PC and then looking at the specs of the PS4.
Even the new quoted PS4 stuff is still like, really? Like,
well, no, I mean, the new PS4 is, at least I can see that being on par with some Oculus stuff.
Really?
Yeah, no, like, have you the specs
I did
for
look at
the
new...
specs,
yes. And I still
the
think
the specs for that, they have,
washy.
the processing power is effectively almost doubled, and the graphics card power is significantly up. I would say that brings it more in line with I'd say a little bit under minimum Oculus spec. But that's still miles ahead of what the PS4 currently is. So to me, I just look at that and I'm like, oh, okay, all of a sudden, the fact that this VR thing exists makes a lot more sense because running games at 90 frames is really a lot to ask for VR, I thought. Like for the current PS4 setup, like that just didn't make any sense to me. So it makes me think, oh, okay, PSVR could have legs because of this. Like legs it wouldn't have had otherwise as far as the console it was attached to goes.
Well, that's why they had that processing box so that
the processing box. From what they said, because they came out and said, "Hey, that processing box isn't going to add to the PS4's power. It's just going to make it so some of the headset and calculations don't have to be done by the console."
Okay. Because I thought I think I remember reading that too. But what I thought initially was that the processing box would allow for more power to transfer into the system, so that.
And that was the theory at first, and then Sony came out and said, "Actually, no. This is just making it so the PS4 doesn't have to do some of those additional calculations on top of rendering these games."
Got it.
Which is insane because the PS4 hardware doesn't run games that great currently.
Yep.
Which is fucking nuts. Like, so yeah, I don't know. It gives me a little bit of hope for PSVR. On the other end of it, it scares me about where the console business goes, and maybe it shouldn't. But right now, it's like the implications of all of a sudden consoles are like the phone market, and every few years there's a slight upgrade, and things will still run on your older console. But, and who knows, maybe the PS4.5 is the only console they put out between now and their next big console, if that even happens.
Well,
like, if there is a PS5. It's just so fucking up in the air, and it's like, there's so much potential for this to have negative effects for consumers.
I wish Giant Bomb didn't write this article, because if Giant Bomb didn't write this article, then there wouldn't be this hubbubaloo about it, which would be fine.
I mean, that's the first. It's rare that we see real journalism coming out of this industry, though. So I don't know if I think it's kind of nice to actually see independent reporting using sources and coming out with information that isn't public. Like I don't know. Like to me, that's them doing their job.
Well, yeah, that's them doing their job, but at the same time, that's also them creating. I mean, I feel like they, and I'm not going to say...
They don't work for Sony. Like, they don't...
No,
really
and I'm not saying that it's
them.
their fault specifically, but because they released this information, granted on their own take, with their own opinion, most likely, embedded in it, because I myself haven't read the article, but I've seen bits of it.
It's pretty straightforward.
It is really informational, yeah. There's not a lot of, like, and I think this. It's, like, straight up, like, hey, these are the new specs. They have, like, a table of, hey, look, it has 8 cores at 1.6 and 8 cores at 2.1 and this and, games. Like, I don't think it's... I don't think they were in the wrong or they shouldn't have done this at all. I think they're doing their job and they do it well, and I think it was totally fine of them to do this. Like, it wasn't like they broke some story about that this was happening. Like, people had known this was happening for a long time.
And I agree with Jeremy.
Yeah, that's
Jeremy, I will say,
I
agree with what you're saying, though. Like, I do agree. It sucks that the conversation is where it is now because of this.
That's what I'm saying. I think that...
But I would say that's almost Sony's fault for not coming out and responding.
Definitely. If Sony would have came out and said, hey, look, this new console it's not going to change like the PS4 or anything like that, or whatever. If they had come out and actually commented on it, then yeah, great. But I think that because it's only Giant Bomb's their documentation on this, and that's it then creates this discourse. It's so divisive now, where you got Sony fanboys like, oh yeah, this is totally fine, like it's whatever, doesn't matter, and then you have basically the rest of the world who's like, this is total bullshit. And it's hard because I can see both sides, though me personally I fall on this is kind of bullshit because Nintendo did this with the new Nintendo 3DS, and I'm afraid of, they say that there's no exclusive features, with the Neo and whatever, but running games at 60 frames per second on the Neo, because of the Neo mode, where games would only run at 30 frames per second on the PS4, that's an exclusive feature. That is exclusive to the Neo because you can't run a game at 60 on the PS4 if that's if that's how it breaks down. So I'm afraid of the Hyrule Legends predicament happening again on PS4.
Sure, although so interestingly, on the Giant Bombcast this last week, and I haven't even listened to the full show yet, I have not had time, but there was some comments, they mentioned some stuff that isn't actually in the article as well. The article is very informational. But they also said, speaking to a lot of developers have said that Sony is being super strict with their rules. About, they're like, hey, so here's like, if you're making games for both Neo mode and PS4, here's the rules for that. And so they seem to be doing a hell of a job with quality control, making sure of that exact thing. That they're making sure that games on PS4 will always run fine. They seem to be laying it out. There are not going to be Neo exclusive games. There are not going to be games that run better. Like, they will run better on Neo. They're not allowed to run worse on Neo, which is actually kind of an interesting thing. They pointed out that it's kind of a Just Cause 3 was an interesting game. I would like to take a look at that maybe, but because it was kind of a thing of, hey, you're not allowed to make your games on Neo run any slower than the PS4 version, because he wanted to say just up the visual fidelity by a shit ton, but maybe that hurt performance a little bit. Right? Yeah, Sony's like, hey, you're not allowed to do that. And Sony's also saying, the games have to be playable, completely playable, not like Hyrule Warriors playable on base PS4. So if they stick to that, and Sony's got a pretty good track record of, if nothing else, doing what they say for the most part, even when what they say is ridiculous, they do tend to stick to it. So I would hope, and whatever. If they don't, there will probably be a lot of consumer response to that's really negative. So I have faith in that sense. The thing I'm most scared of is just, what does this do to how consoles are sold and how the mainstream market understands consoles? Because right now it's, hey, every 5 to 8 years, there is a new box. It will run everything better. It was going to cost about this much. Have fun. And now it looks like we're leaving that, because there's all those Xbox rumors last month too, and it's all the same thing. It's, hey, we're kind of maybe thinking of making this a little bit more moddable, and you can maybe swap some stuff out and make it run a little better. It's just like, what the fuck is happening right now?
So what does everyone think if? And we'll just say that it's confirmed. We'll just say that for the sake of this discussion. What does everyone think it's going to cost? And
They said 400. They said 400.
Is that what they said?
I believe they said. Yeah, it said in
the document itself.
They said no price was provided in their documents. So previous reports all indicate that the Neo would sell at $400.
I mean, the stuff on the inside isn't like that much of a jump anywhere that it would cost more than that now. Like the stuff that's in the PS4 now is, cheaper than $400. So they're basically just building a new PS4 with new things at this point where it would be $400.
Well, so I'll just lay out the specs real quick for casual people and try to help them understand this a little bit. So the processor,
damn casuals.
The processor in the Neo, the original PS4 is 8 Jaguar cores at 1.6 gigahertz.
Which is
Gigahertz, yeah, it's garbage. Gigahertz is the speed. It is an octo-core processor, though. It's 8 cores.
Which is good.
The Neo is also 8 cores, but they are clocked at 2.1 gigahertz instead of 1.6, so that's a 0.5 increase.
It's still not huge, but
it's not great, but it's a little better.
It doesn't sound like a lot, but in my experience, 2 gigahertz...
Going up to 2 is like kind of the benchmark for stuff.
So more importantly than that, like a 0.5 increase is actually huge. If you ever overclocked a PC, you know what you're talking about. A 0.3 increase is super noticeable. A 0.5 is actually like quite a lot more than what they're currently working with. The changes there are actually pretty significant. And then the graphics card is, they don't specify the exact details. It is an improved version of the old graphics card. But this is the more interesting part is they are doubling the computing units. So they're going from 18 to 36. And they're also increasing the clock speed of each of those units
by about 100.
by 111 megahertz, which is also it seems like it's not a huge leap. It's not a next generation leap, but the leap is something that you would absolutely 100% notice. And then the only other upgrade that they've mentioned is RAM, and RAM is not a huge deal. It's still 8 gigs of DDR5.
They're like unlocking more space within what it already is, basically.
Yeah, it's just faster. It's slightly faster RAM. It's 218 gigabytes per second instead of 176.
I mean, and so the processor jumped up. Everything's moved up a bit, and I still think, like, kind of overall, that the graphics change is probably the most severe, like doubling the amount that it has. But I still think that CPU bottlenecks that graphics card at some point. Like, you're not going to see like games go from 30 to 60 and be perfect with this.
So you might be surprised, because the thing, CPUs are a really weird thing, because clocks, it's so confusing, because the way CPUs are built, right? You look at that speed, you see 2.1, and the thing is, you can't actually compare that to any other processor because of the way processors work. I might have a 6-core processor clocked at 4.3 gigahertz, and you could have a 4-core processor clocked at 2.1 that's faster than mine. Because that's how fucking processing works, and it's really confusing how all that works, because different people that make processors do it in really different ways. So it's kind of an off-putting, hard to compare thing. But in my experience, just whatever your current clock speed is. So if you say you're clocked at 2 gigahertz, if you're going up by 0.5, that's a significant upgrade. So I feel like the CPU, whatever it is, whatever the Neo ends up being, the performance will be noticeable. You will definitely see hey, this game looks a little better and it's running at double the frame rate. That's dope. So there's potential there for, I think it's kind of the next, if the PS4 had launched with these specs, it would have been a console I think I'd be much more happy with than I am right now. Because playing on PC, it's just, gap between those, like building a cheap PC or having a PS4 at this point are really similar. And that's kind of disappointing, because I just didn't feel like the jump from PS3 to PS4 was that big. So I'll probably, if I can trade in my current console for a decent amount of money, I'll probably get a Neo. Like, it seems like kind of where I want my console hardware to be. Because I don't need like the most cutting edge crazy thing. But it definitely seems like it'll be running games more where I would have expected this generation to be running games.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. Like, if there's a good trade program, you'll do it, Sam. Like, what about Evan?
I'll honestly sell my thing on Craigslist. If I have to pay $200 for a Neo, I'll just sell, I will try to sell my current console for $200, $250 on Craigslist, and then just spend the rest of the money, get a nicer console.
Yeah.
I'm assuming GameStop will come out and be like, here's a program to do this, and they might like take a hit on it just because they know they'll move like a shitload of those things if they do give give us your PS4 and get a new one for this with the game or whatever. And I would be totally fine. Like if it cost me $200, anything above that, I'll be, I don't know, kind of washy depending on where money is at that time. But yeah, if I can get rid of this and get a new one for not the full price, I'll probably do it, I guess.
Yeah, same thing for me. If I can do a trade, and I mean 50% would be ideal, but of course, I imagine either because a lot of deals GameStop doesn't run on all of the deals that happen, obviously, so it depends on whether Sony runs the deal or if GameStop runs the deal. But yeah, if I could trade in and get a decent amount to knock the price of Neo down, I'd be fine. I wouldn't have a problem doing that.
Yeah, well, I'll probably trade my Batman PS4 and keep my Destiny one and buy PSVR as well and be totally broke.
Oh, see, there you go.
Isn't that interesting, by the way? We're all, or at least a few of us, are all just bitching about at least potential problems with
but
this.
we're all going to do
we're
it.
We're all 100% on board with buying it.
Actually, I know it'll suck for people who don't know, like if it's like the end of May and like they buy a PS4 and then
it's gonna kill
2 weeks
them
later
too.
They announce a new one and people are pissed. Like that's fine. Like I've had my PS4 for obviously 3 years. I've gotten plenty of playtime out of it. Obviously I've bought additional PS4, so I've gotten tons from it. So I have no problem buying a new one if it's better because I want the best thing possible for my games besides spending money on a PC.